Thrown out as too sick to save, but the man took her home. Now she's carrying his child.
The outer rim of Sarin, Nine's medical zone, wasn't a place people lingered. Most knew what that back gate was used for. Patients marked palliative only were escorted out quietly. Those the system had labeled unsalvageable. Not by death, but by cost. Once discharged beyond treatment code, they became invisible. Darren Miles didn't usually pass through this zone. He worked nutritional compliance for the civilian relief kitchens near District 3, coordinating food packs, monitoring chemical balance in long-stored ration stock, ensuring nothing spoiled before distribution. He'd once worked in field psych. Years ago, before budget cuts gutted his department and left him adrift between temporary contracts. Now, he wasn't a soldier or a medic or a figure with clearance. Just a civilian in a long coat, trying to keep the basics functioning on a half-forgotten colony no one wanted to talk about anymore. He was cutting through the rain-drenched service corridor behind Emergency Gate 7 to avoid the congested main throughway. It was quiet here, damp, dim. Cooling units leaked condensation down the scarred walls. No lights worked past the first 20 meters. A drone buzzed above him once, scanning for warmth. It didn't stop. That's when he saw her. She was lying between a rusted waste chute and a thermal vent pipe, barefoot, curled in a half-fetal position. Her legs were thin, discolored at the joints. Her skin, violet-toned and slick with sweat, had the sheen of someone losing hydration fast. Her face was turned away, silver-white hair matted to her temple. The med slip she wore had peeled from one shoulder and stuck to her hip, revealing blue-tinted bruises. A strip of printed adhesive clung just below her collarbone. No further resources authorized. For a second, Darren didn't move. This wasn't his job. He wasn't trained for late-stage NIDC response. He didn't have access to antivirals or tissue stabilizers. The right decision, the smart decision, the one he'd seen countless others make, was to walk away. Like the drone, like the others before him, like the hospital that had dumped her here. But his legs didn't move. His chest felt tight. She shifted slightly. A tremor passed through her left leg. Her lips parted barely. Her breathing was shallow, erratic. She made a sound. Not a word. Just a small, broken exhale. That was enough. He dropped his thermal bag onto the wet stone and crouched beside her. One hand reached for her neck, gently, carefully, and found a pulse. Weak. Too fast. He touched her cheek. Burning. He looked down the alley. No one. No guards. No personnel. Only a city slowly bleeding out beneath a planet-sized storm in orbit. His mouth tightened. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. She didn't resist. Her eyes fluttered but didn't open. He slid one arm under her legs, the other behind her back, and lifted her into his arms. She weighed less than she should. Her skin was warm and clammy through the fabric. The wind bit into him as he stepped out from the corridor. The rain had picked up again, thin and sharp. He kept his head down and walked fast. Every step carried her weight. Not heavy, but fragile. Her breathing rasped against his collar. Her gown soaked through his sleeves. He felt the subtle tremble in her limbs. And still, not a word from her. Not a single question. He passed a checkpoint arch, rusted and unmanned. Stepped over a broken power conduit. Kept to the side streets, away from traffic cams. No one stopped him. A woman nodded absently in his direction, but kept walking. Darren's grip didn't loosen. His apartment was 7 minutes away, in the abandoned education district. Most of the residents were gone. No enforcement came there unless someone filed a report, and no one did. He reached the stairwell, nudged open the main hatch with his foot, and climbed slowly. Second floor, room 12B. A flickering panel above the door buzzed faintly. He pressed his wrist against the scanner. A soft click. The door slid open. Warm air hit him immediately, recycled, a bit stale but better than outside. He carried her to the corner cot beside the wall heater. The room was small but organized. Folded blankets on a shelf, a portable nutrient prep unit on the counter, medical box beside it. Basic but clean. He laid her down and pulled the coat off. Her gown was soaked and falling apart at the seams. It looked like a disposable wrap-out issued to low-priority patients. Adhesive backing barely held. Her feet were raw, bruised around the toes. Her knees were dotted with old injection sites. He swallowed. He opened his med case, retrieved a thermal blanket, scissors, electrolyte packs, and a water basin. Heated towels. Cleaned her arms first, then her legs, then carefully lifted the fabric to check for sores along her back. She didn't stir. He used a cloth to wipe the sweat from her forehead. Her skin was burning hot, especially around the joints. He mixed a paste of rehydrated root starch and mineral broth, thick, neutral tasting, and tested a spoonful against his wrist. He brought it to her lips. "Try," he whispered. Her lips barely moved. He touched the edge of the spoon to her mouth. A drop went in. She coughed but swallowed. He did it again and again. 30 minutes passed. Still, she didn't speak. He pressed another wet cloth to her chest, lifted her arms gently to rub down the undersides, checking for hidden sores. Her ribs showed clearly now. She'd lost too much mass. Her breathing remained shallow. He considered administering a mild stim, then decided against it. Too risky with dehydration. He moved a cot mattress onto the floor beside her, laid a fresh blanket over it, and settled with his back to the heater. Sleep didn't come. He kept his hand loosely draped over the edge of her cot, close enough for her to feel. At some point during the night, she made a sound. He sat up. Her eyes were cracked open, just a sliver. She looked at him, or past him. He leaned closer. "You're safe," he said. "No one's going to touch you here." She didn't react. He poured a small cup of water, lifted her head, and helped her sip. After a moment, her voice came, dry and rough. "Why did you bring me back?" He didn't answer immediately. He just met her eyes and spoke calmly. "Because you were dying," he said, and no one else stopped. She blinked slowly. Her breathing hitched. Then she whispered again. "You didn't touch me. I touched your arms, your face, your legs, to clean you. That's all." She swallowed hard. "But not like that." "No." "Why not?" He shifted. "Because that's not what this is." Silence. Then her eyelids fluttered, closed again. She didn't speak again that night, but she stayed alive. And when Darren finally closed his eyes on the floor beside her, with the heater humming and the rain ticking against the glass, he realized something quietly. He had no idea what tomorrow would look like. But for tonight, he had done the only thing that mattered. He chose not to leave her behind. Darren woke to the soft clink of ceramic. His eyes opened instantly. No alarm, just instinct. He sat up from the floor mattress, the muscles in his neck stiff from sleeping without a pillow, and looked toward the cot. She was sitting up, not fully upright, just enough to reach the metal cup on the bedside table. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, but she drank without help this time. Her silver-white hair clung to her neck and cheek, still tangled from sweat and sleep. The oversized black shirt he'd put on her had slipped from one shoulder again, exposing the ridge of her collarbone and part of her upper chest, where a faint bruise was beginning to fade. She saw him watching. Their eyes locked for a moment. Then she looked away. Darren stood slowly. His back popped. He crossed the room, knelt by the cot, and reached for the cup, wanting to refill it. She hesitated, then nodded once. He took the cup, refilled it from the small purifier unit in the corner, and brought it back. When he offered it, she took it from his hand directly. That was new. She drank, slower this time. Her throat worked hard with each swallow. Her other hand stayed curled in the blanket, still gripping it tightly. Darren crouched again. "You're stable now. Fever's dropped. You've been asleep almost 2 full days. Kept your fluid intake up, so that helped." She didn't answer, but he saw her glance sideways, wary. She was evaluating him, listening more than reacting. "I'm Darren," he added. "Civilian. I'm not part of the hospital. I found you behind gate 7. Silence stretched. He waited. Finally, she rasped. "You don't ask my name?" He shook his head. "You'll tell me if you want." Another pause. "Aurenia." He nodded slowly. "Okay." More silence. Her breathing had evened out. No wheezing. Her fingers had color again. "I was supposed to die there," she said, voice raw. That was the point. He didn't correct her. She looked at him, this time directly. "You don't know what I had, do you?" "I do," he said. "Collapse fever. NIDC. Late stage. I've treated patients with it before." They made her pause. He continued, "They say it's irreversible in late progression, but that's based on average recovery data, standard triage assessments, not individual variables. You weren't beyond care, just beyond funding." Her eyes narrowed. "You speak like them. I used to be one of them." A flicker of expression moved across her face. Not trust, just recognition. A slot clicked into place in her understanding. "I was field psych for inter-colony trauma triage," he said, "before that funding cut 6 years ago. Now I work nutrition diagnostics. That's why I knew how to stabilize you." She didn't respond, but her shoulders lowered slightly. Still guarded, but listening. "I kept you hydrated, cleaned the infection points, regulated your body temp," he added. "That's what got your fever down. And my clothes? They were soaked, torn. I had to change them." She looked at her lap. He waited. After a moment, she said quietly, "Did you see everything?" "Yes." She lifted her eyes again. And it didn't change anything. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Outside, the dull groan of a passing air hauler echoed down the alley. The room vibrated faintly with it. Arinia closed her eyes, as if that sound was something familiar, something she could predict. Darren stood. "I'll make food," he said. "If you can sit up, you should eat." She didn't answer, but when he turned to the prep counter, he heard the slight shift of the cot frame. When he looked back, she was pushing herself upright, legs hanging over the side now. She winced as she moved. "Easy," he said, moving to support her elbow. She pulled her arm away, not sharply but deliberately. "I can move." "Okay." He didn't press. He returned to the prep unit and began grinding root starch and soft green leaf into a warm paste. The room smelled faintly of cumin and something slightly metallic, leftover scent from the mineral broth base. He served the food in 2 small ceramic bowls, offered hers with a spoon, and sat in the chair opposite her. She ate slowly. Each bite seemed like a calculation. Not for poison. He could tell she wasn't paranoid like that, but for understanding how long she'd be allowed to keep this peace. Between spoonfuls, her eyes kept flicking around the room. "You're looking for cameras?" he said. She stopped chewing. "There aren't any," he added. "A beat. No one helped me at the hospital," she said. "They sedated me and wrote me off. Said my case was unviable, that I had already failed 1 course of treatment." "I believe you." She set the spoon down. "You don't even ask where I'm from. Would it change what I did?" That caught her off guard. "No," she said quietly. "But you're supposed to ask. Then tell me when it matters to you." Arinia picked up the spoon again, took another bite. He watched her, not to analyze, just to be sure she was finishing. She didn't speak again until the bowl was empty. Then, in a voice low and unsure, she asked, "Why are you really doing this?" He met her eyes. "Because I couldn't ignore you. That's not a reason. That's a reaction." He exhaled slowly. She was sharp, beneath the rasp, beneath the fatigue. Her mind was still sharp. "You're right," he admitted. "Maybe I just didn't want to be the kind of person who steps over someone like you again." She blinked. "I've done that before," he added. "Years ago. Watched someone die. Someone younger than you. We were told not to intervene. That would compromise neutrality. So I didn't. And she died before the med drone even finished logging the refusal." He leaned back. "I remember her face more clearly than anyone else I ever saved." Aurinia's expression didn't change, but she said nothing more. She stood, slowly, with effort, and walked barefoot across the room to the corner where the heating vent blew warm air through the wall grill. She didn't ask permission. She simply stood there, letting the warmth touch her spine through the thin shirt. Darren didn't stop her. He picked up the empty bowls, rinsed them in silence, and dried them. Later, as dusk fell and the sky outside turned a dull orange against the rotting rooftops, she spoke from across the room without turning around. "You know they'll notice." "Who?" "Anyone. Neighbors. Systems. My sense changed. My gates changed. I'm not dying anymore. That makes me visible." He nodded. "I'll deal with that," he said. She turned around. "You're not responsible for me." He tilted his head. "I didn't ask to be. But you are." He looked at her. "I know." She didn't move, just watched him, measured him. Then, without smiling, she said softly, "I don't know what to do with that." "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to know yet." And for the first time since she woke up, Aurenia sat down not because she was weak, but because she chose to. The next morning, the first thing Darren noticed was the quiet. Aurenia hadn't made a sound all night. No groans, no shifting in the cot, no coughing fits. He opened his eyes slowly and listened. She was still here. He sat up and looked toward the far wall. She had moved again, this time sitting on the windowsill, her knees drawn up, one arm resting on her leg, the other hand holding a folded cloth. The shirt she wore still hung loose, but her posture had changed. She looked alert, awake in a way she hadn't been before. The window was sealed with plexiglass, scratched and dull from age. Outside, steam hissed from a ruptured vent along the street. Beyond that, the empty shell of a school building leaned against itself like it had been waiting for someone to knock it down for decades. Darren pulled a clean shirt over his head and padded quietly into the kitchen area. He started heating water and opening the nutrient packs. She didn't turn. "You said you used to work psych." Her voice startled him, not because she spoke, but because it came so clearly. Stronger than yesterday. "I did," he said, without turning around. "You still talk like one." He glanced over his shoulder. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, "you keep watching my reactions like you're trying to map the recovery curve. You let me speak first. You don't interrupt. You hold your breath when you think I might say something honest." Darren didn't answer right away. He poured hot water over the mix and stirred until it softened into an edible paste. Then he crossed the room and handed her the bowl. She looked at it, then at him. "I'm not trying to fix you," he said finally. "I'm trying not to hurt you." Aurenia took the bowl and ate a spoonful in silence. He returned to the other chair, sat down slowly, and watched her out of the corner of his eye. It was time to ask, what happened before the hospital? She didn't stop eating, but her jaw stiffened. She swallowed. "You mean why I was sick? Or why they gave up?" "Both." A long pause. "I worked sanitation level 6, she said. Manual containment bay. No filters. Just gloves and time limits." Darren blinked. "That was a bottom-tier job. Dangerous exposure levels. They said I had resistance in my blood," she continued. "Said my hybrid genetics gave me tolerance. So they assigned me to waste shift. No bonuses. No protective gear. When I collapsed, they tested me. Found degenerative collapse. Claimed I must have always had it. That it was inherited. Was it?" She shook her head. "No. No one in my family ever had immune decay. My mother lived to 78. My father's still alive. But I was marked as a crossbred work frame, so the records were flagged. I was cheaper to lose than to treat." Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't telling him this for sympathy. She was laying it out like evidence. "They sedated me. Said I'd be transferred to palliative wing. I woke up behind the gate. My legs wouldn't move. I thought I was already dead." Darren sat with that. He felt a tension settle between them. Not anger, but a kind of brittle awareness. She wasn't broken. She wasn't fragile. But she had been made disposable. "I have a question," she said suddenly. "All right." She set the empty bowl aside and stood, walking toward him until they were almost level. She stopped a step away, close enough that he could see the fine silver freckles on her chest where the collar of the shirt dipped low. "Why didn't you touch me?" His breath caught. She didn't ask it with accusation. Her tone was level, controlled. But beneath that, there was tension, like she had replayed the question in her head multiple times before now. He didn't answer right away. Then, "Because you couldn't consent." She stared at him. "Even unconscious?" she asked. "Especially then." She tilted her head. "Most men wouldn't have cared." "I'm not most men." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "Studying him. Testing him. And if I had offered, back then, I still would have refused." She stepped slightly closer. "What about now?" Darren didn't flinch. He met her gaze directly. "You're healing. That means you still don't know what you want yet." Something flickered across her expression. Not irritation. Not defeat. Something quieter. "Do you want me?" she asked. His jaw tightened. He didn't look away. "Yes." "Then why wait?" He exhaled through his nose. "Because I respect you." The silence after that felt heavier than any argument. Eventually, she took a step back. "Your answer made it worse," she muttered, but not angrily. "How?" "Because it's harder to distrust you now." She walked to the cot and sat again. I wasn't trying to test you, she said quietly, but part of me needed to know if you were like the others. If this was just a game where you play the patient one until I give in. He shook his head. It's not. She ran her fingers through her hair, finally dry now, though still matted near the roots. If I let you touch me, she said, voice lower now, it'll be because I want to feel something again. Not because I think you deserve a reward. I know, he said. She looked up at him. Good. The conversation hung unfinished but no longer sharp. Later that day, she tried walking the hallway. Her steps were slow, unsteady. He stayed close, but didn't hold her unless she reached out first. She didn't. She wanted to make it alone. She made it 10 steps before collapsing against the wall, panting. He helped her back to the cot. She let him. Her pride didn't flare this time. It had shifted into something else. Determination. That night, after bathing with his help, only her lower legs, nothing more, she wrapped herself in the soft towel and sat on the cot without speaking. He gave her privacy to dress. When he returned, she was wearing one of his other shirts, a dark gray one that clung more closely to her body. She wasn't testing him now. She was getting used to the fabric, the warmth, the feeling of not being exposed. As he pulled out the floor mattress, she spoke. I still don't know why you did it, she said. Pulled you from the alley? She nodded. I don't think I could have lived with leaving you there. She looked down at her lap. Then maybe, she said, you pulled me out for your own sake. He didn't argue, and she didn't seem angry about it. Instead, she lay down on the cot, turned toward the wall, and whispered something under her breath. He almost missed it, but he caught the words. Thank you anyway. Darren came home late from his nutrient audit shift, later than usual. A calibration error in the station's food dispersal system had pulled him into 3 extra hours of manual data checks. By the time he entered his unit, the hallway lights were already dimmed to sleep mode. He stepped inside quietly. The room smelled different. Not bad, just different. Less medical. More human. Warm cloth. Something faintly floral. Something lived in. Aurenia wasn't in the cot. For a brief second, panic gripped his chest. He scanned the room, then turned, only to find her standing at the tiny mirror beside the shelf. She wore one of his clean, charcoal gray tunics. She had altered it, tied it tighter at the waist with a strip of salvage fabric. It hung asymmetrically, revealing one shoulder, one leg. Not for display, for comfort, function, but it still affected him. Her hair had been brushed. It was quiet here. She seemed to want to say something, but didn't. Later that night, she stepped into the bath chamber while Darren was cleaning up. She didn't call out, just walked in quietly and set a folded shirt on the bench. He turned slightly, startled, but didn't speak. She stood at the threshold. I can't scrub my back properly, she said. Not yet. He met her eyes. All right, I want help. Not because I can't, just because I want to ask. Okay, I'll take the towel off myself. She did. Her body wasn't perfect. Her back bore faint surgical scars. Her hips were thinner than they should have been. Her thighs still showed trace bruising from 4 straps. But she stood straight. She let him see her, not with shame, but with honesty. She stepped into the stall and turned the water valve. He followed a moment later, slowly. The steam rose quickly. The room filled with warmth. She stood with her back to him. He picked up the sponge and moved close. Close enough to smell her skin, clean now like water and soft mineral soap. He touched her back lightly. She didn't flinch. He scrubbed gently, across her shoulders, down her spine. Her breathing was steady. At one point, she reached up and touched his wrist. You still haven't asked for anything, she said. I told you, I'm not here to take. She looked over her shoulder. But you want to? Yes. Good. She turned around, and for a second, neither of them moved. Her chest was bare. Her stomach still showed faint lines of dehydration. Her legs were strong, but not yet full. Her eyes were the sharpest thing in the room. She placed a hand on his chest. I'm not offering sex, she said. I know. I want touch. Just that. Just closeness. He nodded once. She leaned into him, damp skin against cloth. Her cheek pressed to his collarbone. His arms moved slowly around her. No urgency. No hunger. Just wait. Warmth. Contact. They stayed like that under the warm spray for minutes. She let her hands rest on his ribs. He let one hand slide slowly up her back. Then, eventually, she pulled away. That's enough. He nodded again and stepped back, gave her space. She toweled herself off and walked back into the main room, wrapped in fresh fabric. Her steps were steady. That night, she didn't say anything when he laid down on the floor mat beside the cot. But when the lights dimmed, her hand slid down beside the bed and found his. She didn't squeeze it. She didn't whisper anything. She just held on. And for the first time since pulling her out of the alley, Darren realized something had changed. She no longer saw herself as a patient. She was becoming herself again. The next morning, Darren woke to quiet breathing above him. Not from the hallway, not from a vent, from just a few feet away. He opened his eyes slowly. Aurenia had moved from the cot during the night. She wasn't on the floor mat either. She was sitting cross-legged on the edge of the bed, elbows resting on her knees, watching him. Her face was unreadable, not hostile, not cold, just awake, present. He sat up cautiously, brushing sleep from his eyes. "You didn't sleep?" he asked. "I did," she said. "I woke up and couldn't go back." He nodded and didn't press further. He knew better now. She'd tell him what mattered in her own time. "You move less in your sleep than I expected," she added. "You barely even shift. I got used to sleeping light. Field work, tight quarters, emergency alerts. You train yourself to stay still." She tilted her head. "You were always this careful, weren't you?" He gave a faint smile. "It depends who you ask." She stood slowly. The oversized tunic she wore today was one she hadn't touched before, a lighter gray, sleeveless, with a hem that hung just below the upper thigh. It clung more closely to her hips now. She didn't adjust it. She didn't need to. "I want to clean the scars today," she said plainly. "The ones on my abdomen." He stood, unsure how to respond. "I can help if you want." "I do want," she interrupted, then softened. "But not in the bath. In the main room, where I can sit and control the light." He nodded. "Of course." Later, she pulled the chair from the wall toward the heater. Darren prepared a warm basin with saline, a cloth, and healing balm. When he turned back, she had lifted the hem of the tunic to just below her chest, exposing her stomach. The scars were pale blue. 5 in total, 2 vertical ones from surgical entries, the rest faint puncture dots near her hips. She sat with her back straight, hands gripping the fabric as if she dared herself not to flinch. Darren knelt, dipped the cloth, and touched it to her skin. She inhaled but didn't stop him. He cleaned carefully, gently. He didn't rush. The saline ran in thin streams down her hip bones. Her legs shifted slightly, not in discomfort, but in response to sensation. She was feeling everything. That was the difference now. He reached for the balm. She touched his wrist. "Use your hand," she said. "Not the cloth." He paused, met her eyes. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He rubbed a small amount between his fingers and pressed his palm to her skin. The contact was warm. Her breath changed. Not a gasp, but a deep exhale like her body had been waiting for something and finally received it. He worked slowly, moving in small circles across her lower abdomen. When his fingers passed over the top of her hip, she shivered slightly. "Too much." She shook her head. "Keep going." Her voice had changed. Lower, rougher. As his hand moved up, brushing near the underside of her ribs, her fingers loosened on the fabric. She let the tunic fall slightly, resting softly against his knuckles. He stopped. Her eyes opened. "I'm not going to faint," she said. "I didn't think you would. I want you to see me," she said. "Really see me. Not just the parts you cleaned. Not the parts that were dying. The ones I'm reclaiming." He stood slowly. She rose with him. Their bodies were close now. Inches. The light from the wall heater cast soft shadows over her curves. Her iridescent eyes shifted faintly in the glow, part lavender, part steel. They searched his face, not for permission, for reaction. "I'm not offering my body as a favor," she said. "I'm choosing to be touched, because I want it. I know. Do you want me?" He didn't answer with words. He stepped closer. His hands moved up her arms, slowly, sliding to her shoulders, then brushing the straps of the tunic aside. She let it fall. No sudden rush. No frantic hands. Just quiet exposure. Her body, once frail and bruised, now stood upright, breathing, present. He moved with care, his hands tracing her skin, her ribs, her waist. She leaned into him, wrapped her arms around his back, and let her head rest against his neck. He guided her to the cot, not as a place of retreat, but as a place of shared space. She lay down first. He followed. They undressed each other, not in haste, but in silence. Every motion was intentional, every breath shared. Their bodies met like puzzle pieces that had been broken before, but now fit, not by force, but by trust. There was no talking, just breathing, just hands, just closeness. No one led, no one followed. They met in the middle. And when it was over, when their bodies had moved, pressed, and melted into something wordless, she didn't turn away. She lay beside him, one leg hooked around his, her fingers tracing the scar near his collarbone he'd never mentioned. "What was this from?" she whispered. "Shrapnel. 6 years ago. Didn't duck fast enough. You kept it. I kept all of it." She exhaled softly and pressed her cheek against his chest. After a long moment, she whispered something so quietly it almost didn't register. "I think I might be carrying something." Darren's heartbeat didn't change. He wrapped his arm tighter around her, kissed her forehead. "Then we'll carry it together," he said. And for the first time in her life, Aurenia believed it. It started with a glance. Nothing overt, just a quiet look from the neighbor across the hall. Darren had stepped out to recycle their water filters, and Aurenia had followed. Her steps were steady now, barefoot still by choice, but confident. She wore a soft wrap around her waist and one of Darren's tailored tunics, adjusted to her shape. Her posture was no longer hunched. Her skin had a faint glow, not from cosmetics, just circulation returning. Health, wholeness. The neighbor, a quiet woman in her 40s who rarely spoke, paused in her doorway when she saw Aurenia pass. Her eyes trailed down Aurenia's figure, then back up. Then, without a word, she pulled her door shut. Aurenia didn't mention it until they were back inside. She looked at me like I'd stolen something. Darren placed the filters on the drying rack. "You didn't." "I know." She stood by the heater, arms folded, not for warmth but restraint. Her eyes stayed on the door. "They didn't notice me before," she said, "when I was skin and fever, when I could barely stand. They never even turned their heads. They notice now because you've changed." She turned to him. "Because I'm visible? Because I'm desirable?" He didn't answer. He knew that wasn't really the question. "I can feel it," she said. "The way the air shifts around me. The way conversations pause. I went to the stairwell yesterday while you were gone. The boy on level 3 stopped talking when he saw me. Didn't blink. Just stared." Darren watched her carefully. "You want me to talk to him?" "No," she said quickly. Then softer, I need to know what this means." He moved closer. "It means people are trying to fit you into the system again, now that you don't look broken." She looked up at him. Her voice was quiet but tight. "They'll start asking where I live, who I'm with, why I'm better. They'll wonder what I traded to stay alive." "You didn't trade anything. I know that." "They don't." He nodded. Let her sit with the truth of that. A few days later, it got worse. They went to the corner food kiosk, an unmanned distribution unit still functioning on emergency power. Darren had brought her before when she could barely stand. No one looked at her then. Now, as she stood beside him, arms bare, belly gently rounded beneath the tunic, the kiosk worker at the refill station didn't look at Darren once. Only her. Aurenia noticed. She didn't shrink. She met his gaze directly. The worker flinched and looked away. Back at the apartment, she sat by the mirror. "I used to hope someone would see me," she said. "Now I wish they'd look away again." Darren sat behind her and brushed her hair. "You're allowed to be seen. Not like this. Not with judgment." She reached up and touched her stomach. Her fingers stilled. "They can tell." He kept brushing carefully. The strands were softer now, easier to smooth. "They can guess," he said. "But it doesn't matter. It matters to me." She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the rusted rooftops. "I'm not ashamed," she said, "but I'm scared." He stood, walked to her, and waited until she turned. She did. "I don't know if this world wants someone like me healed," she admitted. "I don't know if they want someone like me carrying life." "I do," he said. She didn't speak, just leaned into him slowly, resting her cheek against his shoulder. That night, she spoke while lying in bed. They'll try to define this, she whispered. I won't let them. They'll say I was saved. You weren't. She looked at him, puzzled. You weren't saved, he said. You survived. You chose to. She didn't say anything for a long time, but her hand slid under his over her belly. Then, finally, she whispered, say it again. He kissed her temple. You survived. And this time, when she fell asleep, her breathing was steady, unafraid. But outside their walls, the silence of the city had changed. It no longer ignored her. It was listening. Aurenia didn't come back inside immediately. She stood in the corridor, staring at the hallway where 3 neighbors had just passed. No words had been exchanged, but it was clear one glance had lingered too long. Another had tightened her coat and stepped aside like Aurenia might contaminate the air. The third simply stopped speaking as he walked by, eyes flicking to her belly, then away. Darren stood behind her, silent. He didn't touch her. Not yet. He waited. Finally, she turned and walked inside. She didn't sit. She walked straight to the sink, poured herself water, and drank half the glass in one go. Then she set it down with a soft, deliberate thud. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter. They think I'm his property, she said. Darren didn't answer. They think I must have bargained. My body for medicine, for housing, that I gave him a child because it was expected. Still, he said nothing. She turned. Her face was calm, but her jaw was clenched. They don't believe this is mine. My body, my choice. They see a woman who lived, and they assume it came at a price. He stepped forward. You want to leave the district? No, she said it clearly, without hesitation. I'm not running, she continued. I was discarded here. I lived here. I healed here. This, she gestured around the room, then down to her stomach. This is mine. Darren gave a single nod. Then, slowly, he said, if you want, I'll tell them. She tilted her head. Tell them what? That we're together. That we live here by choice. That what we made, what we're making, wasn't taken or forced or bargained for. That no one gets to write your story except you. Aurenia crossed the room. She stopped in front of him and looked up. No, she said. I'll tell them. She stepped past him, opened the door, and walked out into the hallway. Darren followed, slowly. There were only 2 people there. The same woman from across the hall and a maintenance worker scanning a ventilation readout. Aurenia walked to the woman. They locked eyes. I'm the one who was left to die outside the hospital, she said. You remember that. The woman blinked but didn't deny it. Aurenia placed her hand over her stomach. This wasn't bought. It wasn't stolen. It wasn't a trade. This was my decision. And I'm not leaving. The woman didn't speak, but she didn't look away either. That was enough. Aurenia turned and walked back inside. Darren held the door for her. She didn't rush. Once inside, she exhaled, sat down slowly on the cot, rested both hands on her belly. She looked up at him. Do you believe me? Yes, he said. Do you believe I'm ready? I think you already were. She smiled, small and tired. Then help me finish something. He knelt in front of her. Cut my hair, she said. He blinked. She nodded. Trim it. Even it out. I want it clean. I want it mine. He retrieved the shears. No hesitation, just careful precision. She sat still as he shaped the strands, removing the last knots, the uneven ends, the pieces that had clung from sickness and sedation. When he was done, she looked in the mirror. Shorter now, even, brighter. Her eyes met her own reflection, and she didn't flinch. That night, she curled into his chest without asking, without questioning whether she deserved it, without weighing whether she had earned it. She simply belonged there. In the morning, they walked together to the old admin kiosk. They registered her under Darren's residence tag, not as a dependent, not as a guest, as an equal occupant. There were no alarms, no flags, no security alerts. The system accepted the new data silently. Back in the unit, Darren unpacked a folded bundle from the bottom drawer, something he'd salvaged months ago before she ever arrived. It was a crib. He began assembling it near the heater, adjusting the brackets, checking the stability. Aurenia watched him, one hand resting lightly on her side. You thought you'd need that someday? She asked. I didn't think I'd get to, he said. She walked over and placed her hand on his. You will. Together, they finished building it, piece by piece, without speaking. And when it was done, they stood quietly over it. Two survivors. Two strangers who weren't strangers anymore. One life healed. Another beginning. No one came to take her away. No one came to question her right to be alive. And for the first time since being left behind on a rain-slicked ramp with a death tag on her chest, Aurenia let herself believe. She wasn't someone saved. She was someone chosen. And now, finally, she was home.